all the missing arrows. Again, yesterday. So the ESM and MIN gets sent all the way to the NSS. That, again, is the serial number of this phone. The switching substation, or the network switching substation, sends back a random number, which is to generate the encryption for that session, an authentication, and another random number to validate that random generated key. I'll touch on that in a second here. Sends the random SSD to generate the encryption key, sends a random number, it responds back with the auth-u, which is the response using that new generated random encryption key, and then the data is encrypted there. This is how the keys generate in CDMA. It's a little more of a pain than GSM, 851. So basically, this is where you can see all the things that the RAND SSD goes into this key generator, along with the ESN and the A key, which is the private key of the phone, whirls it all up, gives you the SSD, which gives you 2 parts, and then the 64-bit auth-u is what the response actually is. I know it's confusing, but it's just we got to get through it just to touch on it. Cool. So femtocells, what? So what are femtocells? So femtocells are basically in-home devices used by the cell companies, or being sold now, or leased, or whatever they're going to do with them, to provide cellular service to a phone without any kind of new technology for the mobile user. Basically, the three big players here in the US have done them. To basically, if you're sitting in the middle of the 10th floor of a building in a data center with concrete walls on all sides that are 6 inches thick, you're not going to get cell service in there, obviously. Basically, this will help you provide cell service in there via IP. So it'll create an IP session back to the cell company, and then rebroadcast a cellular signal on those 800, 850, and 1900 bands for your phone to use. Your phone works on them, they know them. The femtocell helps you be able to then use a service without having to get a new handset like the, I believe it's T-Mobile that does the Wi-Fi based one, which is kind of cool. So yeah, provide cell service in areas you can't use it, and it's a big growing area. So how growing? There's a report out by the ABI research study which says there will be 32 million femtocell access points worldwide. They also call a femtocell access point a FAP. FAP. I don't know how much I trust them. Purely on that reason, I don't trust them. But so basically, it's kind of interesting numbers, and I don't know if I believe that yet based on the way the market's going so far, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I'm not going to say it's not going to hit that number. I'm not going to say it is. We'll see in 2011. War is beginning. But there's another big, everyone wants a piece of the share, including Magic Jack. Now for 1995, all you have to, yeah. They're trying to do a femtocell, and I'll touch on that in a second, and the scary things with that. So what does the consumer see with a femtocell? What do they actually care about? How do I plug it in, and how does it give me my phone? Basically, you plug it in your network and give it power, and it does all the handshake stuff for you. But how does it actually work that we care about? So basically, this is the slide from Samsung's version of it. This is how their cellular system works, or femtocell system works. Basically, the femtocell, which in Samsung's world is called the ubicell, acts as the BTS and BSC of the BSS, the base station, the radio towers, right? It then, over IP, which is an IPsec tunnel actually all the way back, connects to the security gateway. Security gateway on the outside is just a big fancy word for VPN concentrator. Then on the inside, it's got all the interconnections to the voice lines and then the provisioning lines for the actual modem so it can get its configuration information, and also all the gateways for data management, etc. So, what are these made of? There are 3 vendors, 2 products, and 1. We good? Thank you. Just like calling people out. No worries. If you need to take it, I mean, we could take it. Put them on speaker. That's cool. Motherfucker.
Is it your mom?
Anyways, I'm sorry. I'm killing time. You all want to get beers tonight, so we'll get going. So there's 3 vendors, 2 products, and 1 group of hackers here in the U.S. Well, there's more, but yeah. So you have vendor A and vendor SV. Vendor A for GSM and vendor SV for CDMA. Well, if you take S and consummate V's, you get TROGDOR. So we're going to call them vendor A and vendor TROGDOR for the time being. I don't like calling it SV. It's just kind of weird. So this is vendor TROGDOR's product. I'll let you draw any conclusion you want to. Basically, so the processor is a TI OMAP 1710. You may see a lot of these processors if you're a hardware person in a lot of cell phones and a lot of other communication devices. What they're running on that OMAP 10 is a Linux 2.6 based kernel and system based on BusyBox. That's why it got very interesting for me when I saw the DHCP request. Yeah. They got two Samsung SBM 1320s of the radio controllers, two MXFE 809080s, 9861. You guys really, who actually cares about the hardware? Sweet, I'll keep going through it. So the GPS is a serial-based GPS by Trimble. There's an FPGA on the board. We weren't able to figure out exactly what it does, but based on documentation from various femtocell providers, it looks like it either does timing calculations or encryption. Ooh, that gives me an idea. The network's a Realtek network adapter, and there's an HDMI interface on the bottom. No, it does not hook up to your TV. We asked Best Buy if my TV was femtocell capable. They said no. But there's other fun stuff with it. This is Vendor A's product. I'll let Jack talk about Vendor A since he's the one who did a lot of the work tearing them apart.
Sit down.
Yes, sir.
All right. So Vendor A was a lot of fun, but it's a Pico chip inside using another serial-based GPS unit by Realtek. It's also FPGA. Again, we don't know if it's doing the encryption or timing-based stuff. Realtek network adapter, and then the interesting thing on there was the pin headers on the boards. After a night in a hotel, we were able to get serial off of that pretty well. We'll touch on that in a moment, I think. Although the nice thing about Vendor A is that they actually had some tamper detection jumpers on the board, so that when you cracked open the case, if you weren't careful, you would have most likely wiped the entire device. Unfortunately for them, they didn't know that Lost Mystery Challenge contestants were going to be opening up their hardware. And if any of you are familiar with Lost Mystery Challenge, you know what I'm talking about. All right, security considerations by Zack.
That was fun. So here, in femtocells, there's really three major areas that, as an attacker, you're going to be looking at. You're going to be looking at the network connection, either on the LAN or the WAN side. You're looking at the femtocell itself, and you're going to be looking at the MSs, the mobile stations or devices. Or can I just call them cell phones from here on in? Cool.
No.
So there's 4 risks I could easily think of, other than Bill Gates. First of all, theft of service. If these aren't properly secured, you could easily get free service from vendor A or vendor TROGDOR. Privacy-wise, if it's a GSM-based one, you could turn into easily an IMSI catcher. For those who don't know what an IMSI catcher is, if you notice, I'm just handing out, again, go to the take the GSM seriously, CD if you're interested, or DVD. Hey, you know, you're passing me your IMSI saying, I want to join your network, I want to join your network, I want to join your network. Well, IMSIs are unique to each person. No, it's not your cell phone number, it's a unique identifier, excuse me, on top of that. So you can set up basically triangulation of IMSIs and figure out where people are and track them based on that. That would be interesting if we could get one to do that. You could also use the device outside of its legal limits, aka forging GPS information to go somewhere else, such as Mexico, and get nice cellular service from back in the States in Mexico. You could also potentially, again, we'll touch on this intercept data part, but if a femtocell was compromised and the encryption was being done on the femtocell and knew the keys of the phones, you could intercept data potentially. So the good, there's always good things to talk about other than Chipotle. They took and on these devices, they're all VPN tunneled across the LAN. So there's a lot of good security in that. They're using a site-to-site pre-shared key and or certificate, depending on the vendor, VPN tunneling. So sniffing the traffic's not going to get you much other than a DHCP request and the handshake for the VPN. The hardware tamper pins that Jackie was talking about, I mean, it's a step. The firewall policies on the devices are really hardened, and it's also kind of in combination with the VPN tunneling. The way the routes are set up is that nothing on the network can talk to it because it's not going to route back. All the routes are defaulted out, except for the gateway. So if you get the gateway, you can talk to the devices still and get by the firewall. But there's not much, in the way of services running on them. We'll touch on what we did find on the services running on them. And on one of the devices, we noticed they were using SSH tunnels or stunnels.